That's correct.
Freeze! Don't move! Why do you have such exhibits in your possession? You are under arrest for possession of human parts dead.
Cops discover bodies in man's trunk during traffic stop. The night was quiet. The kind of quiet that makes every little sound feel louder. Tires humming on the asphalt, crickets hiding in the grass at the roadside, a cool breeze moving across the dark stretch of highway. For Officer Daniel Cole, it was supposed to be another long night of routine patrol, a shift he had done hundreds of times before. But what he didn't know, what nobody knew, was that tonight, something unspeakable was riding in the trunk of a passing car. Something that would turn a routine traffic stop into one of the most horrifying discoveries in the department's history. If you are getting any value from this video, click the subscribe button so you can stay updated when awesome video like this is uploaded on this channel. Also, tell me where you are watching from in the comment section. I really appreciate your massive support. Thanks a lot. It began with something simple. A car drifting ever so slightly between lanes. Not erratic enough to scream drunk driver, but unusual enough to raise suspicion. Officers are trained to trust their instincts, and instincts were telling Officer Cole to take a closer look. He flicked on his lights. Red and blue beams cut through the night, reflecting off the back window of a dark sedan. The car hesitated for a moment, then pulled to the side of the road. The stop seemed ordinary, nothing out of place. But ordinary was about to end. The driver. Behind the wheel sat a man in his mid-30s, neatly dressed in a plain red polo and jeans. Nothing about him screamed trouble. His license was valid, his car insurance up to date. He handed over documents with calm hands, steady eyes. But there was something strange, something Officer Cole couldn't quite put his finger on. His demeanor was too calm, too rehearsed, like he had practiced how to act during a stop. Most drivers fidget, they ask questions, they look nervous. But this man, he was stone still, answering only what was asked, offering nothing more. And then came the smell. At first it was faint, the kind of odor you might dismiss as garbage or spoiled food. But with the windows cracked and the cool night air moving through the car, it became sharper, stronger. It clung in the air, sour and heavy. It was the smell of decay. The officer's instinct. Police training tells you to follow procedure, but experience tells you to trust your gut. And Cole's gut was telling him something was terribly wrong. He asked the driver to step out of the car. The man complied without protest, standing quietly by the roadside, his face unreadable. No fear, no anger, just blank calm. Cole glanced at the rear seat. Empty, clean, too clean. For a man supposedly running errands late at night, the back of the car was spotless. But then, on the floor by the seat, he noticed it. A small, crumpled piece of cloth. Stained. Dark. Cole radioed for backup. Not because he had proof, not because of anything he could put in a report yet, but because something in his gut screamed that he was standing on the edge of something bigger, something darker. The trunk. When backup arrived, the night shifted. Another officer stood by, keeping an eye on the driver, while Cole walked to the trunk. The man's calm broke for the first time. His lips tightened. His eyes flicked toward the car, then back to the ground. Cole pulled on a pair of gloves. His hand hovered over the trunk latch. 1,000 thoughts rushed through his head. Drugs? Weapons? Stolen property? He lifted it slowly. They were too many, groaning in the quiet too night. Full. The smell hit harder. That sour, inside the trunk stench of decomposition trash bags was stronger now. Large, crawling out heavy of the looking, trunk and into the night tight. air. Cole's Garbage chest bags tightened. Don't usually raise His alarms. Heart pounded in his but ears. These weren't ordinary. He reached into the trunk, pulled one bag closer, and tore it open. Inside was not garbage, not food, not anything that should have been in a trunk. It was human flesh. Pale, lifeless. A hand. Fingers curled. The nightmare unfolds. Bodies. Multiple bodies. Wrapped. Stuffed. Hidden in plain sight, inside a car rolling casually down the highway. The other officer stumbled back, muttering under his breath. Even hardened cops, men and women who had seen blood, violence, death, couldn't easily process what they were seeing. The driver didn't move, didn't fight, didn't run. He just stood there, expressionless, like this was all part of some plan. Backup was called again. Within minutes, the roadside was flooded with flashing lights. Sirens pierced the air. Radios crackled with urgency. The highway, once quiet, was now a crime scene. The driver was handcuffed, led to the patrol car. His silence was chilling. Not a word, not a question, as if none of it surprised him. The aftermath at the scene. Investigators swarmed. Cameras flashed. Evidence bags piled up. One by one, the black trash bags were removed from the trunk and lined up on the pavement. Each one heavier than the last. Each one carrying the weight of a life lost. Drivers passing on the opposite side slowed, their headlights sweeping across the scene, their eyes wide in disbelief. Nobody could quite grasp what had been uncovered. Officer Cole stood at a distance, staring at the bags. The smell clung to his uniform. The image burned into his mind. For years he would replay that moment. The trunk opening, the sight of pale flesh, the reality of what evil looks like when it hides in plain sight. Because this wasn't just about evidence. This wasn't just another arrest. These were people. Victims who had names, families, stories, all cut short, now reduced to remains hidden in a stranger's trunk. And the man responsible? He was only just beginning to reveal the darkness he carried. This was no routine traffic stop. This was the start of an investigation that would unravel secrets darker than anyone imagined. And as detectives dug deeper, they would uncover the twisted mind of a man who walked among neighbors, co-workers, and friends, while hiding death in his trunk. At the roadside, the night had erupted into chaos. What started as a traffic stop was now a full-scale crime scene. The driver, a man who introduced himself only as David Marlowe, sat quietly in the back of a patrol car, his hands cuffed, his face unreadable. For the officers, shock gave way to questions. Who was this man? Why did he have bodies in his trunk? And most importantly, how many more secrets was he hiding? The suspects, calm. What unsettled the police wasn't just the discovery of human remains. It was the suspect's reaction. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't even nervous. David sat there almost detached, staring out the window as if the flashing lights and frantic voices around him had nothing to do with him. Some officers described it later as inhuman calm, a stillness that didn't belong to someone caught in the middle of such horror. When questioned at the scene, his responses were short. "Yes, officer." "No, officer." No explanations. No excuses. Just an eerie compliance, as if being arrested was simply another step in a plan already written. The interrogation room. By dawn, David Marlowe was transferred to the county sheriff's department. He was booked, fingerprinted, and led into a cold, gray interrogation room. Detectives Alvarez and Jennings took the lead, both veterans, both hardened by years of chasing criminals. Yet, neither had ever sat across from someone quite like this. The tape recorder clicked on. The red light blinked. Detective Alvarez leaned forward, his voice steady. "David, you know why you're here. We found the bags in your trunk. We know what's inside. Do you want to tell us how they got there?" David lifted his eyes slowly. His voice, calm and almost polite, carried no emotion. "They don't matter anymore." The chilling responses. The room went silent. The detectives exchanged a glance. Jennings tried again. "Don't matter? Those are people, David. Someone's daughter, someone's son. You want to explain yourself? David shrugged. Just a small lift of the shoulders. Almost casual. They were already broken. I just finished what the world started. The words sent a chill through the room. The detectives pressed harder. Where had he found them? Why had he done it? Were there more? But David never gave direct answers. Only fragments. Phrases that sounded rehearsed, almost philosophical. The weak are forgotten. Pain is permanent unless someone ends it. They were better off silent. It was like talking to a wall built of riddles and cruelty. The investigation begins. While the interrogation went in circles, investigators outside the room were piecing together the puzzle. They ran David's name through the system. No major criminal record. A few traffic violations. Nothing that screamed killer. Neighbors described him as quiet. The kind of man who mowed his lawn on Saturdays and nodded politely but never invited conversation. He worked at a local warehouse, paid his bills on time. To the world, David was invisible, ordinary. But ordinary men don't drive around with bodies in their trunks. Detectives searched his home, a modest two-bedroom house at the edge of town. What they found inside deepened the mystery. Inside the house was spotless. Too spotless. Counters wiped clean. No dishes, no clutter. Walls bare except for a single calendar hanging in the kitchen. But what was on that calendar turned stomachs cold. Dates, circled in red. Random days across the past year. No notes, no reminders, just red rings. And when investigators cross-referenced those dates, many of them matched reports of missing persons from nearby towns. In the basement, they found something worse. A workbench lined with tools. Not unusual in itself, until they noticed the stains. Dark blotches on the wood. A saw with what looked like dried blood crusted near the blade. Plastic sheeting rolled up in a corner. Industrial-strength garbage bags identical to the ones pulled from the trunk. And on a shelf, neatly arranged, were driver's licenses. 7 of them. Each belonging to someone reported missing. Each one now a silent testimony against the man who had collected them. The media storm. News spread fast. By the next morning, headlines screamed across the state. Bodies found in car trunk after routine stop. Community shocked by gruesome discovery. Who is David Marlowe? Reporters camped outside the sheriff's office. Cameras flashed. Microphones shoved forward. Everyone wanted answers. How many victims were there? How long had this been going on? And how could someone so ordinary hide something so monstrous? For the community, fear settled like a fog. People who once waved to David on his way to work now wondered how close they had come to becoming one of those dates circled in red. Parents held their children tighter. Neighbors locked doors earlier. Trust evaporated overnight. Back to the interrogation. Detectives returned to the room, armed with what they had found. The licenses, the calendar, the blood-stained tools. They pushed them across the table toward David. Alvarez leaned in, his voice sharper now. These people, they had families, they had lives. You kept their licenses like trophies. Why, David? Why them? David's eyes flicked down, then back up. For the first time, he smiled. Just a thin, chilling curve of the lips. They were chosen. Jennings slammed a hand on the table. Chosen for what? David leaned back in his chair, his calm unshaken. To disappear. Someone had to do it. The psychological games. Interrogators brought in psychologists, hoping to break through. They studied his tone, his posture, his choice of words. What they found was disturbing. David didn't fit the mold of a panicked criminal. He wasn't remorseful. He wasn't defensive. He was controlled, calculated. And he seemed to believe, truly believe, that what he had done was justified. Experts later called it a textbook example of a sociopath masking himself within society. Invisible, unremarkable, until the mask slipped. Community in shock. Meanwhile, families of the missing gathered, desperate for answers. Each new piece of evidence connected David to another name, another face, another life cut short. Vigils were held in church parking lots. Candles flickered in the night. Pictures of smiling faces taped to poster boards. For them, the case wasn't about headlines or police strategy. It was about closure, about finding out if their loved one was among the black bags lined up under a tent at the county morgue. The silent prisoner. Days turned into weeks, but David Marlowe never gave a full confession. He answered questions in fragments, riddles, and chilling one-liners. He never once asked for a lawyer, never once asked how much time he might face. To some, it seemed he wanted to be caught. To others, it felt like he was still holding secrets, dangling them like bait, feeding off the attention. And as investigators dug deeper, one thing became clear. The bodies in the trunk were just the beginning. Because in the shadows of David's quiet life were trails of evidence that suggested he had been at this for years. Long before the traffic stop, long before Officer Cole flipped on his lights. The man in the red polo wasn't just carrying bodies. He was carrying the weight of a hidden history. A history that investigators were now determined to uncover, piece by piece. The investigation unfolds. Secrets, evidence, and chilling discoveries. The hours that followed the grisly traffic stop were nothing short of chaotic. Police cruisers lined the stretch of road where the black sedan had been pulled over. Flashing red and blue lights painted the night sky, creating an eerie strobe effect across the trees and nearby houses. What had started as a routine stop for a minor violation had now become one of the most disturbing crime scenes in recent memory. The suspect, still in cuffs, sat silently on the curb, his face pale under the harsh beams of the patrol car's headlights. He avoided eye contact, his jaw tight, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Detectives who had been called to the scene circled around him, trying to gauge his composure. "Does he look nervous to you?" one officer whispered. Another shook his head. "He doesn't look nervous. He looks cold." The open trunk was now sealed off with yellow crime scene tape. Forensic units were already at work, photographing every angle, carefully removing the black trash bags that contained the horrific discovery. As each bag was unsealed, the scene grew darker, heavier. The bodies, 2 women and 1 man, were identified as young adults, their lives brutally cut short. The first breakthrough. Back at headquarters, the evidence started piling up. Investigators ran the suspect's license and registration. His name, Daniel Cross, a 38-year-old warehouse worker with no prior record, no outstanding warrants, no history of violence. On paper, he looked like an ordinary man. But the bodies told a different story. Detectives scoured his vehicle inch by inch. In the glove compartment, they found a crumpled notebook filled with strange entries, addresses, times, and what looked like coded notes. Some pages had chilling phrases scribbled hastily. "She won't stop screaming. Tie tighter." No mistakes this time. The forensics team discovered fibers on the duct tape used to bind the victims, fibers that matched rope found in the trunk. A crowbar with faint traces of blood was tucked beneath the spare tire compartment. Everything pointed to careful, deliberate acts of violence. But the question remained. Why? The interrogation begins. Daniel Cross was brought into the interrogation room, his wrists still shackled. The room was small, sterile, with a single table and 2 chairs. A camera blinked silently in the corner. Detective Ramirez sat across from him, dropping the crumpled notebook on the table with a loud thud. "Daniel, we stopped you for a broken taillight. That's it. A simple violation. But now, here we are. You know what we found in your trunk." Daniel didn't flinch. His eyes stayed fixed on the wall behind Ramirez. 3 bodies, the detective continued. 2 women, 1 man, all young, all dead. And you were driving around with them in your trunk. So help me understand, how does a warehouse worker with no criminal record end up here? At first, Daniel remained silent. Minutes stretched. The hum of the fluorescent light above was the only sound in the room. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, almost calculated. They weren't supposed to be there. Ramirez leaned in. What do you mean they weren't supposed to be there? You put them there. Daniel gave a twisted half-smile. You don't understand. They were chosen. The detective's pen froze mid-note. Chosen? By who? Daniel tilted his head, his expression unreadable. By me. By someone else. Doesn't matter. They're gone now. The words chilled the room. Ramirez knew he was facing not just a criminal, but a man whose mind operated in darkness, unraveling his past. As the interrogation stalled, investigators dug deeper into Daniel's life. Neighbors described him as quiet, polite, and unassuming. He kept to himself, rarely socialized, and often worked late shifts. But there were red flags no one had paid attention to. A former co-worker recalled how Daniel sometimes muttered strange things under his breath, phrases about control and obedience. Another remembered an incident where he became enraged over something trivial, his calm exterior shattering in seconds. Detectives searched his small apartment. Inside, they found more disturbing evidence. A locked trunk under his bed filled with zip ties, gloves, duct tape, and old photographs of unidentified women. Some photos had red X's marked across their faces, and in a hidden drawer, they found a flash drive. On it were chilling videos, grainy footage of Daniel following strangers late at night, recording them from a distance. Some of those strangers matched the victims in his car. The case was no longer about a traffic stop gone wrong. This was the work of a predator who had been stalking his victims for months, maybe years. Public outrage. When news of the discovery broke, the community was shaken to its core. Headlines splashed across every major outlet. Routine traffic stop leads to shocking discovery. Man found driving with bodies in trunk. Suspect may be linked to multiple disappearances. Vigils were held for the victims. Families wept openly on camera, pleading for justice. Social media erupted with anger, demanding to know how someone like Daniel Cross had slipped through the cracks. Monsters don't always look like monsters, one local resident said in an interview. Sometimes they look like the guy next door. Connecting the dots. Forensic analysis soon linked Daniel's DNA to at least 2 other unsolved cases from the past 3 years. Women who had vanished without a trace. Their families had waited for answers, clinging to hope. Now, the truth was surfacing, and it was more horrifying than anyone imagined. The pattern became clear. Daniel wasn't just a killer. He was a hunter. He watched, waited, and struck when no one was looking. The notebook, the flash drive, the tools, all were part of a methodical ritual he had perfected over time. But even as evidence mounted, Daniel remained calm in custody. When pressed, he would only repeat the same phrase. They were chosen. Detectives debated what it meant. Was he part of something larger? A cult? A delusion? Or was it simply his twisted way of justifying the atrocities he had committed? The breaking point. On the 5th day of interrogation, Detective Ramirez tried a new tactic. Instead of pushing, he sat silently across from Daniel, letting the weight of the silence grow. Finally, Ramirez slid a photograph across the table, the smiling face of one of the victims, taken before her disappearance. Daniel's eyes flickered, just for a second. His calm mask cracked. "You followed her for weeks," Ramirez said quietly. "We saw the footage on your drive. She was 21 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. You didn't choose her. You stole her. You took her future. You destroyed her family." Daniel clenched his fists, his composure unraveling. "She wouldn't stop fighting." Ramirez leaned in. "Because she wanted to live. Because you're not some chosen messenger. You're a coward." The room went still. Daniel's breathing grew heavy, and then, almost like a switch, he whispered something that made the detective's blood run cold. There are more. Ramirez froze. More what? Daniel's lips curled into a chilling smile. More bodies. You'll never find them all. The search expands. Those words detonated like a bombshell. Search teams were dispatched immediately, combing through areas connected to Daniel's past. Old job sites, abandoned buildings, wooded trails he was known to walk. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Every lead was pursued. The discovery of the 3 bodies in his trunk had only been the beginning. Investigators now feared they were dealing with a serial killer whose true body count was far higher. And as Daniel sat in his cell, eerily calm once more, one thought haunted the detectives. How many lives had he taken? And how long had he been hiding in plain sight? The shocking trial, verdict, and the last twist. The courtroom was packed. Not a single seat remained empty. Reporters filled the back rows, cameras flashed outside the doors, and the world tuned in to watch a case that had gripped the nation. The state versus Marcus Hale. Marcus sat at the defense table, dressed in a crisp gray suit. His once calm demeanor was cracking. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. His lawyer whispered to him, but Marcus's gaze stayed fixed on the jury. 12 strangers who now held his fate. The prosecution wasted no time painting Marcus as a cold-blooded killer. Prosecutor. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence is clear. 2 human bodies were discovered in the trunk of Marcus Hale's vehicle. He lied to officers. He resisted arrest. He concealed evidence. His fingerprints were found all over the trash bags. The cause of death, blunt force trauma, matches the hammer discovered in his garage. This was no accident. This was murder. The jury shifted uncomfortably. The defense countered with a story of innocence. Defense attorney. My client is a victim of circumstance. Marcus Hale did not kill anyone. He found himself in a terrible situation, forced to transport those bodies out of fear for his life. The real killers threatened him. They used him. And then they disappeared, leaving him as the fall guy. The trial dragged on for weeks. Witnesses testified. Forensic experts presented charts and diagrams. Police officers, including Officer Daniels and Officer Ruiz, the ones who made the original traffic stop, spoke with steady voices about the night they opened the trunk. The prosecution's strongest evidence was the hammer, found in Marcus's garage with faint traces of blood. DNA testing confirmed it belonged to one of the victims. The defense argued the hammer was planted, but the truth? Nobody knew for sure. The emotional testimony. Then came the day of the emotional testimony. The victims' families took the stand. Mothers wept. Brothers clenched their fists in anger. A father spoke through broken words. Father of victim. My son was only 23. He had dreams. He had a future. And all of it was stolen. We may never know why, but we know who did it. And that man is sitting right there. He pointed directly at Marcus. The courtroom went silent. Even Marcus lowered his head. The verdict approaches. As the trial neared its end, the nation held its breath. News channels ran live coverage. Social media erupted with debates. Was Marcus guilty, or was he a pawn in a larger conspiracy? The defense delivered a passionate closing argument. Defense attorney. Reasonable doubt. That is all it takes. You don't have to know Marcus is innocent. You only need to doubt his guilt. And with evidence this circumstantial, how could you not? The prosecution thundered back. Prosecutor. Reasonable doubt does not mean ignoring the truth. Marcus Hale killed 2 people. He stuffed them into his trunk. He thought he could get away. But justice has caught up with him. The jury left to deliberate. Hours turned into a full day. And then, the verdict was ready. The verdict. The courtroom stood still as the foreman rose. Judge. Has the jury reached a verdict? Foreman. Yes, Your Honor. He unfolded the paper. Everyone held their breath. Foreman. We, the jury, find the defendant, Marcus Hale, guilty of murder in the 1st degree. Gasps filled the courtroom. Marcus's knees buckled. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, but Marcus shook it off. He slammed his fists on the table. Marcus, no, you don't understand. I didn't do it. They set me up. Bailiffs rushed in, restraining him as he shouted. The families of the victims wept in relief. The prosecutor nodded with grim satisfaction. The judge's gavel struck hard. Judge. Order! Order in the court! Marcus was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The case seemed closed. Justice, it appeared, had been served. But the story was not over. The twist. Months later, in the darkness of a federal penitentiary, Marcus sat alone in his cell. He had stopped speaking to reporters. He had stopped writing appeals. His eyes were hollow, his voice weak. But one night, a guard delivered a letter, no return address, just his name scrawled on the front. Marcus opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read, "We told you to keep quiet. Now you know what happens when you talk. K." Marcus's heart raced. He pressed the paper to his chest. His worst fear had been confirmed. Someone else was involved. Someone powerful enough to frame him and get away with it. The revelation. Investigators would later learn fragments of truth. A shadowy figure, known only by the initial K, had connections to organized crime. The victims were linked to an underground gambling ring. And Marcus? He had been their bookkeeper. But when things went bad, Marcus was left to carry the blame. The bodies in his trunk? Not his doing. The hammer? Planted? The truth? Buried under lies, manipulation, and fear. Yet none of that mattered anymore. Marcus would die in prison, branded a killer. And so, the story of the traffic stop that shocked the world ends not with justice, but with shadows. Because sometimes the scariest truth is this: innocent or guilty. Once the world decides your fate, there may be no turning back. As for Officer Daniels, the man who first opened that trunk, he would later confess in an interview that he still had nightmares. "I see those bags every night," he said. "And sometimes I see Marcus's face, too. And I wonder, did we really catch the killer? Or did we just open a door we'll never be able to close?" This was the case that haunted a city, divided a nation, and left questions that may never be answered. The story of Marcus Hale proves that sometimes the scariest monsters don't hide in the dark. They hide in plain sight. Thank you for watching. If you were the jury, what would your verdict have been? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget, subscribe to True Life Stories TV for more chilling real-life stories.